The moment a billionaire laughs at a pregnant woman in public is usually the moment he destroys himself. The laughter rolled across the 42nd floor conference room like champagne spilling over crystal. Nathaniel Brooks leaned back in his leather chair, expensive cufflinks catching the gray Manhattan light, while 6 attorneys smirked around the polished oak table. Across from them sat Emily Brooks, 8 months pregnant and completely alone. Her pale blue maternity dress looked painfully simple against the sea of black designer suits. One trembling hand rested beneath her stomach, while the other tightened around a folder she could barely hold steady anymore. Outside the glass walls, rain streaked down the skyline in silver lines, but inside the room the air felt dry and sharp enough to crack skin. Nathaniel glanced at his Rolex and sighed dramatically. "Well," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "it looks like your lawyer isn't coming after all." A few people chuckled under their breath. Vanessa Hale crossed her legs beside him, her white blazer perfectly tailored, her diamond bracelet glimmering as she casually lifted her phone toward Emily. Recording. Emily noticed it immediately. So did everyone else. Nobody stopped her. "Maybe she thought crying would be enough," Vanessa said with a smile so polished it almost looked kind. "Honestly, this is getting embarrassing." Emily lowered her eyes toward the conference table. The baby shifted suddenly beneath her ribs, a slow movement that pulled a quiet breath from her chest. She whispered something under her breath, almost too soft to hear. Nathaniel laughed again. "What was that?" Emily finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with sleepless nights and months of quiet humiliation, but there was something else there too. Something strangely calm. "My lawyer is coming," she said softly. The room went silent for exactly 1 second before another wave of laughter exploded. Nathaniel rubbed his jaw, amused. "Emily, your credit cards were frozen 3 days ago. You couldn't afford a parking ticket right now, let alone a Manhattan attorney." Vanessa tilted her phone slightly closer to Emily's face. "This clip is going viral tonight." Emily said nothing. She only adjusted her hand beneath her stomach as another kick rolled through her belly. Nathaniel opened a thick stack of papers in front of him. "Let's make this simple. You walk away quietly, you get the condo in Brooklyn, limited alimony for 18 months, and supervised custody until the baby turns 5. Even one of the junior attorneys blinked at that. Harsh. Emily stared at the paperwork without touching it. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping softly against the glass walls like impatient fingers. Then came the sound. Ding. The elevator doors opened down the hallway outside the conference room. Nobody looked at first. Nathaniel kept talking. "You should be grateful I'm even offering this after everything you've put me through." Slow footsteps echoed across the marble floor outside. Calm. Measured. Expensive heels striking stone with perfect rhythm. One by one, the senior attorneys at the table stopped smiling. A young assistant near the doorway suddenly stood up straight so fast she nearly dropped her tablet. Nathaniel frowned. "What's going on?" Nobody answered him. The footsteps stopped outside the glass doors. Then the handle turned. The conference room door opened slowly enough to make every second hurt. The woman standing there did not rush. She did not smile. She stepped inside with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent her entire life walking into rooms where powerful men suddenly forgot how to breathe. Her silver hair rested neatly against the collar of a charcoal cashmere coat, and black leather gloves covered her hands despite the warmth inside the building. In one hand she carried a deep red folder worn softly at the corners from years of use. The room had gone completely silent now except for the faint tapping of rain against the glass walls 40 stories above Manhattan. Emily looked up first. For the first time that morning, her shoulders relaxed. Just slightly. Nathaniel noticed it immediately. His expression hardened. "Who exactly are you?" he asked. The woman did not answer him. Instead, her eyes moved calmly across the conference room, past the expensive suits and polished watches and carefully rehearsed arrogance. Then she looked directly at Emily. "I apologize for being late, sweetheart," she said softly. "Traffic downtown was impossible." Vanessa let out a small laugh of disbelief and lowered her phone for the first time in nearly 10 minutes. "Wait," she said. "That is her lawyer?" Nobody joined her laughter. Not this time. A senior attorney near the far end of the table suddenly stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward several inches across the marble floor. Then another attorney stood. Then another. Nathaniel frowned harder. "What is this?" he demanded. The oldest partner in the room cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Carter," he said quietly, "we were not informed you would be attending personally." Vanessa blinked. Nathaniel turned toward him. "Personally?" The older man ignored him completely. "Would you like the head seat at the table?" Evelyn Carter removed one glove finger by finger with calm precision. "No," she replied. "I think I will sit beside my daughter." Daughter. The word seemed to hit the room like a crack in glass. Nathaniel stared at Emily as if seeing her clearly for the first time in years. "Your mother?" he asked slowly. Emily nodded once. Nothing more. Vanessa forced a smile that looked painfully unstable now. "I am sorry, but are we supposed to know who she is?" Nobody answered immediately. Evelyn placed the red folder carefully onto the conference table before sitting beside Emily. Then she folded her gloves neatly in her lap and finally looked directly at Vanessa. "No," she said calmly. "But your lawyers certainly should." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Nathaniel shifted in his chair, irritation beginning to replace confidence. "Look," he said sharply. "Whoever you are, this is a private legal negotiation. Emily has already agreed to settlement discussions." Emily looked at him for the first time since Evelyn entered the room. "No," she said quietly. "You told me I had no choice." Nathaniel opened his mouth to respond, but Evelyn interrupted him without raising her voice. "That has always been your favorite tactic, Nathaniel. Convince people they are trapped before they realize you built the cage yourself." His face lost color. Very slowly. Like someone pulling light out of a room inch by inch. "How do you know my name?" Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "Because 10 years ago you stood in my office wearing a suit from a department store asking for funding nobody else would give you." Every eye in the room turned toward Nathaniel now. Vanessa lowered her phone completely. "That is impossible," Nathaniel said immediately, but his voice lacked certainty. Evelyn opened the red folder. Inside were documents organized with terrifying precision. "Brookline Technologies," she said calmly. "March 14th. 11 years ago. Revenue under $80,000. 3 failed investors. 1 unpaid payroll cycle." Nathaniel swallowed hard. Emily watched him silently. "You applied for emergency backing through the Carter Foundation," Evelyn continued. "You promised your company would change the world." The rain outside intensified, streaking silver rivers down the glass skyline behind them. Nathaniel forced a laugh that sounded hollow now. "Lots of people applied for grants." "Yes," Evelyn replied. "But very few begged in my office for 3 hours while pretending they were not about to lose everything." A junior attorney across the table quickly looked down to hide his expression. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Vanessa stared between them in confusion. "Nathaniel," she whispered, "what is she talking about?" He ignored her completely. Evelyn slowly slid one paper across the table. Then another. Offshore account statements. Hidden property transfers. Wire receipts. The atmosphere inside the conference room changed instantly. The arrogance disappeared first. Then the smiles. Then even the illusion of control. One attorney reached for the documents with visibly shaking fingers. Nathaniel stood up so fast his chair slammed backward against the glass wall. "You had no right to access those files," he snapped. Evelyn looked up at him with the calm expression of someone who had already seen the ending hours ago. "Oh," she said softly, "that is only the beginning." The room no longer felt like a negotiation. It felt like the exact second before a skyscraper collapses, when the steel still appears strong but everybody can hear the structure beginning to groan underneath. Nathaniel remained standing beside the overturned chair, one hand pressed flat against the conference table, while rain light flickered across his face. Emily had seen that look before. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. The kind he used to hide behind expensive watches and perfectly rehearsed confidence. Evelyn calmly adjusted the first document in front of her. You transferred $12 million into an offshore account 3 weeks after Emily informed you about the pregnancy, she said. One attorney immediately removed his glasses and rubbed both eyes. Another quietly reached for a legal pad and stopped writing altogether. Vanessa looked around the room as if she suddenly realized nobody was on her side anymore. This is ridiculous, Nathaniel snapped. Those are business holdings. No, Evelyn replied softly. Those are concealed marital assets. The silence after that sentence stretched painfully long. Emily watched raindrops slide down the glass walls behind Nathaniel like melting silver threads. Somewhere below the building, Manhattan traffic hummed through the storm, completely unaware that a billionaire empire was beginning to crack apart 40 floors above the street. Vanessa forced a laugh that sounded weak now. Okay, even if that is true, Emily still signed the post-nuptial agreement. Evelyn slowly turned another page in the red folder. You mean the agreement signed while she was heavily medicated in a prenatal recovery room? Nathaniel's face tightened instantly. Emily looked up sharply. She had never told her mother about that day. Never. The memory came back all at once anyway. The sterile hospital lights. The smell of antiseptic. Nathaniel standing beside her bed in a navy coat, while she drifted in and out of exhaustion after doctors spent hours monitoring complications with the baby. He had told her the paperwork was insurance documentation. Temporary financial adjustments for the company during tax season. Just sign here, sweetheart, he had said gently while kissing her forehead. Emily remembered her shaking hand. Holding the pen. She remembered trusting him. Evelyn slid a photograph across the table. Hospital timestamp. Signature records. Surveillance stills from the maternity floor. Nathaniel stared at the image without breathing. You manipulated legal documents under medically compromised circumstances, Evelyn said quietly. That tends to concern judges. Vanessa's expression changed completely now. The confidence was gone. Nathaniel, she whispered carefully, you said the agreement was legitimate. He ignored her again. Sweat had started gathering along his hairline despite the cold air conditioning flowing through the conference room vents. One of the attorneys finally spoke. Mr. Brooks, he said cautiously, is there anything else we should know before this proceeds further? Nathaniel turned toward him sharply. Do not start acting scared now. I pay your firm $20 million a year. Nobody answered him. The old confidence in the room had vanished. Lawyers who had laughed at Emily 30 minutes earlier now avoided looking directly at Evelyn Carter. Because everybody in New York legal circles knew exactly who she was. 20 years earlier she had dismantled 3 corporate fraud empires almost single-handedly. Federal judges quoted her legal opinions. Wall Street executives feared seeing her name attached to investigations. And now she sat beside her pregnant daughter wearing black gloves and absolute calm. Emily noticed something strange then. Her mother was not angry. Not even slightly. That was what terrified everyone most. Evelyn opened another section of the red folder. Now, she said softly, shall we discuss the payments made to Miss Hale? Vanessa's head snapped upward. Excuse me? Wire transfer receipts slid across the table one after another. Jewelry purchases. Luxury apartment payments. A $70,000 vehicle lease. International vacations billed through company accounts. Vanessa's face drained of color with each page. Nathaniel? She asked quietly. He still said nothing. You informed shareholders these were executive development expenses, Evelyn continued. That becomes problematic once personal relationships are involved. Vanessa suddenly stood up from her chair. You told me the company approved everything. Nathaniel slammed both hands against the table hard enough to rattle the water glasses. Sit down, Vanessa. The command echoed through the conference room. But she did not sit. She stared at him like someone waking up inside a nightmare too late to escape it. Emily watched silently while another small movement rolled beneath her stomach. The baby kicked again. Slow. Strong. Alive. Her hand rested there instinctively. For months Nathaniel had convinced her she was weak. Emotional. Replaceable. Too dependent to survive without him. But now she realized something devastating. He had never been afraid of losing her love. He had been afraid of losing control over someone who still believed in goodness after standing beside him for years. Evelyn closed the red folder halfway and folded her hands calmly on top of it. "This can still end quietly," she said. Nathaniel laughed once under his breath. Broken. Hollow. "You think this destroys me?" Evelyn looked directly into his eyes for the first time since entering the room. "No," she said softly. "I think what comes next will." Then she reached into the folder again and removed a sealed envelope marked Federal Inquiry Division. For 3 full seconds nobody in the conference room moved. The sealed envelope rested on the polished oak table like something radioactive. Even the rain outside seemed quieter now, as if Manhattan itself had stopped to listen. Nathaniel stared at the words Federal Inquiry Division stamped across the front in dark blue letters. His breathing had changed. Shorter now. Faster. Emily noticed because she used to know every version of him. The charming billionaire at charity galas. The cold executive during earnings calls. The affectionate husband cameras loved photographing beside her at fundraisers. But this version was different. This was the man underneath all the others. The one who finally understood he was losing control of the story. Vanessa slowly lowered herself back into her chair, her face pale beneath layers of expensive makeup. "Nathaniel," she whispered carefully, "tell me this is not real." He did not answer. One of the attorneys reached toward the envelope before stopping halfway. "Ms. Carter," he said cautiously, "are federal investigators already involved?" Evelyn looked at him calmly. "Not yet," she replied. "At the moment this remains a private matter." The relief that crossed several faces lasted less than 2 seconds. "However," she continued softly, "that depends entirely on what happens in this room during the next 15 minutes. Nobody breathed after that. Emily sat quietly beside her mother while another faint movement rolled beneath her stomach. The baby had become strangely calm now, almost as if sensing the shift happening around her. For months Emily had spent sleepless nights terrified about the future. Terrified about raising a child alone. Terrified about losing her home, her stability, her dignity. Nathaniel had made sure of that. Every conversation during the past 6 months had been carefully designed to weaken her confidence piece by piece. "You are too emotional lately. You should let me handle the finances. Stress is not good for the baby." Looking back now, Emily realized none of it had been concern. It had been strategy. Evelyn gently slid the sealed envelope closer toward Nathaniel. "Open it," she said. He did not move. One of the younger attorneys shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Another quietly checked his phone beneath the table before his eyes widened slightly. Emily noticed that too. News traveled fast in Manhattan financial circles. Very fast. Nathaniel finally reached for the envelope with stiff fingers. The room remained silent except for the faint tear of paper splitting open. He removed several pages and immediately froze. Completely. Vanessa leaned toward him. "What is it?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "Nothing." Evelyn folded her hands calmly. "Read it out loud." Nathaniel looked up sharply. "Absolutely not." "Then I will." The tension in the room thickened instantly. Nathaniel slammed the papers back onto the table. "You think you can intimidate me with paperwork?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea how many senators take my calls?" Evelyn's expression never changed. "Do you know how many of them still take mine?" Silence. Brutal silence. The old senior partner near the window slowly removed his glasses again. "Nathaniel," he said quietly, "perhaps we should pause this meeting and reevaluate." "No," Nathaniel cut him off sharply. Nobody leaves this room. But he no longer sounded powerful. He sounded desperate. Emily watched the storm clouds shifting behind the skyline while memories drifted through her mind one after another. The first apartment she shared with Nathaniel before the money came. The nights they ate takeout on the floor because they could not afford furniture yet. The way he used to kiss her forehead while promising they would build a future together. She had believed every word. Back then Nathaniel still looked at people with warmth instead of calculation. Somewhere along the way ambition had hollowed him out from the inside until nothing remained except appetite. More money. More status. More control. And when Emily became pregnant, he stopped seeing her as a partner entirely. She became an obstacle to manage. Vanessa suddenly spoke again, her voice smaller now. Were you ever planning to tell me any of this? Nathaniel rubbed both hands across his face. This is being exaggerated. You told me Emily was unstable. Vanessa whispered. You said she was paranoid. Emily finally looked directly at her. Not with anger. Just exhaustion. Vanessa looked away first. Evelyn opened another section of the folder. There is also the matter of the psychiatric evaluation. Nathaniel's head snapped upward instantly. Do not. But Evelyn already slid the document across the table. Emily stared at it in confusion before the words registered. Recommended parental instability review. Requested temporary custody limitation. Her chest tightened painfully. Nathaniel had secretly attempted to build a case against her. During the pregnancy. While smiling beside her in public photographs. You tried to say I was mentally unfit? Emily asked quietly. Her voice shook for the first time all morning. Nathaniel stood there frozen. He could not even look at her now. And somehow that hurt more than anything else. The room felt colder suddenly. One attorney whispered something. Under his breath that sounded dangerously close to Jesus Christ. Evelyn closed the folder slowly. A man who destroys the mother of his child usually believes nobody important is watching, she said calmly. Then she looked directly at Nathaniel. You made one terrible mistake. His eyes lifted toward hers. You forgot she was my daughter. The words stayed hanging in the conference room long after Evelyn stopped speaking. You forgot she was my daughter. Nobody moved. Nobody even looked at the rain anymore. Every eye remained locked on Nathaniel Brooks, the billionaire who suddenly looked nothing like the man featured on magazine covers beside private jets and charity trophies. His tie hung slightly loose now. His perfect posture was gone. For the first time since Emily walked into the room that morning, he looked tired. Truly tired. Like a man discovering money could not buy his way out of consequences. Emily sat very still beside her mother, one hand resting beneath her stomach while the other slowly tightened around the arm of her chair. The baby shifted gently again, and somehow that tiny movement grounded her more than anything else in the room. Evelyn leaned back slightly, calm as ever. I gave you opportunities, she said quietly. I believed you were ambitious, intelligent, disciplined. But somewhere along the way, ambition became entitlement. Nathaniel laughed bitterly under his breath. You think this is about morality? He asked. This city runs on power, Evelyn. No, she replied softly. This city runs on fear. Powerful men simply mistake fear for respect. Silence again. Vanessa stared at the documents spread across the table like they belonged to someone she no longer recognized. Her phone remained face down now, forgotten completely. Did you lie to me too? She asked quietly. Nathaniel closed his eyes for one brief second before answering. Vanessa, this is not the time. That is not an answer. Her voice cracked slightly. Emily looked at her carefully. Months ago she would have hated Vanessa completely. The younger woman had appeared beside Nathaniel at galas and corporate dinners wearing confident smiles and expensive dresses while Emily sat home alone pretending not to notice the distance growing inside her marriage. But now Emily saw something different. Vanessa had not understood the game either. Nathaniel manipulated people differently depending on what they wanted most. Emily wanted love. Vanessa wanted security. He promised both of them exactly what they needed to hear. One of the attorneys suddenly cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Brooks," he said carefully, "if these financial disclosures become public, shareholder confidence could collapse immediately." Another attorney nodded. "The board will demand explanations." Nathaniel snapped toward them instantly. "You are supposed to be defending me. We are trying to contain damage." The older man replied quietly. Nathaniel stared around the room in disbelief. Emily recognized the feeling on his face now. Isolation. The same isolation he had slowly built around her for years. He used to tell her she was too emotional to understand business, too sensitive to handle pressure, too dependent to survive alone. Meanwhile, he quietly cut her off from every source of stability she had left. Friends stopped calling after Nathaniel labeled them negative influences. Financial access disappeared under the excuse of restructuring investments. Even family became complicated because Nathaniel hated anyone who reminded Emily she deserved respect. But he had made one critical mistake. He assumed kindness meant weakness. Evelyn slowly opened the red folder one final time. "There is one more matter," she said calmly. Nathaniel rubbed both hands across his face. "What now?" She slid a thin stack of papers toward him. Emily noticed the date immediately. 3 months earlier. Her heart skipped painfully. She remembered that week. Nathaniel had suddenly become unusually affectionate. Flowers delivered to the apartment. Dinner reservations. Soft apologies whispered late at night, while she rested her tired body against his chest, believing maybe the distance between them could still be repaired. She had wanted so badly to believe the marriage was not broken beyond saving. Evelyn's voice cut gently through the silence. "You filed preliminary relocation documents in Switzerland." Emily froze. Nathaniel said nothing. The filing included future custody petitions for the child. Evelyn continued softly. Singular. The room seemed to tilt slightly around Emily. Singular. Not plural. Not shared custody. Full custody for himself alone. Emily stared at Nathaniel as understanding slowly spread through her chest like cold water. "You were planning to take my baby away from me," she whispered. Nathaniel looked at her finally. Really looked at her. For 1 second guilt flickered across his face before disappearing beneath exhaustion. "Emily, listen to me, no." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. Everyone in the room went still again. Emily slowly pushed herself upright from the chair despite the ache in her lower back. 8 months pregnant, exhausted, emotionally shattered, and yet somehow standing taller than she had in years. "All this time," she said quietly, "I thought I was fighting to save a marriage." Nathaniel opened his mouth but nothing came out. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but they never fell. "You were preparing for a future where I did not exist." The rain hammered harder against the windows now, dark clouds swallowing the skyline behind them. Evelyn remained silent beside her daughter because this moment no longer belonged to lawyers or documents or hidden accounts. This was the moment Emily finally saw the truth clearly enough to stop begging for crumbs from someone incapable of love. Nathaniel took one slow step toward her. "I can fix this." Emily almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny. Because it was tragic. Billionaires always believed every disaster could be negotiated if they threw enough money at it. But some things collapsed too completely to rebuild. Evelyn quietly gathered the papers back into the red folder. "No," she said softly before Emily could answer him. "What you are feeling right now is the consequence of discovering she no longer needs your permission to leave." The conference room had become so quiet that Emily could hear the soft ticking of the antique clock mounted beside the glass wall. Every second sounded louder now. Sharper. Like time itself had slowed down just to watch Nathaniel Brooks lose everything piece by piece. He stood motionless near the end of the table, while the storm darkened the Manhattan skyline behind him. The city lights below had started flickering through the rain, turning the windows into mirrors where everyone in the room could see themselves clearly for the first time. Lawyers. Executives. Opportunists. People who once laughed at a pregnant woman sitting alone without representation. Nobody was laughing anymore. Emily lowered herself carefully back into her chair, one hand pressed gently against the side of her stomach where the baby shifted again. She felt strangely calm now. Not happy. Not vindictive. Just awake. Like someone stepping out of a long nightmare and finally realizing the sunlight hurts because it is real. Nathaniel loosened his tie slowly and looked toward Evelyn. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. The question hung heavily in the room because everybody understood what it really meant. "How much will this cost me?" Evelyn folded her gloves together on top of the red folder. "I want my daughter protected," she replied. "That should have been your priority from the beginning." Nathaniel laughed bitterly under his breath. "You think this is simple? My company supports thousands of employees. If these accusations become public, stock prices collapse by morning. Consequences usually arrive exactly when people begin believing they are untouchable," Evelyn said calmly. Vanessa stood abruptly from her chair again. "I am leaving." Nobody stopped her. But before she reached the door, Evelyn spoke softly without even turning around. "You may want to contact independent legal counsel first." Vanessa froze immediately. "What?" Evelyn opened the folder once more and removed another document. "Several luxury purchases made through Brooks Global were registered under your name. If federal auditors investigate misuse of corporate funds, you will likely be questioned." Vanessa's face lost the last trace of confidence she had left. "Nathaniel," she whispered, "tell me she is bluffing." He said nothing. That silence answered everything. Vanessa stared at him for 3 long seconds before something inside her finally broke. "You promised me I was different," she said quietly. "You said she never understood you." Emily watched Nathaniel carefully then. Not because she still loved him. That feeling had been replaced by something colder now. Clarity. She realized Nathaniel had spent years telling every woman in his life a slightly different version of the same story. Emily was too emotional. Vanessa was more sophisticated. Investors were family. Employees were loyal. He built relationships the same way he built companies. By identifying weaknesses and feeding people exactly enough attention to keep them useful. Vanessa shook her head slowly. "My God!" she whispered. "You do not even know how to love people." Nathaniel finally snapped. "Enough." His voice cracked sharply through the room. "All of you standing here judging me like you are better than I am." He pointed toward the attorneys. "Every person at this table profits from the same system." Nobody answered him because part of what he said was true. Manhattan towers were filled with powerful people who smiled politely while morality bent quietly beneath billion-dollar deals. But Nathaniel made one fatal mistake. He believed corruption was normal everywhere simply because it lived inside him. Evelyn stood slowly from her chair. Even at her age, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who never needed to raise her voice to control a room. "You are correct about one thing," she said softly. "This system protects men like you every day." She stepped closer. "But occasionally the wrong woman survives long enough to expose it." The silence afterward felt enormous. Emily suddenly remembered the first time Nathaniel met her mother nearly 6 years earlier. They had been engaged only 2 months. Nathaniel spent the entire dinner charming everyone at the table, asking intelligent questions, complimenting Evelyn's legal career, pretending to admire strong women. Afterward, Emily asked her mother what she thought of him. Evelyn had smiled carefully before answering. "Ambition is not dangerous, sweetheart. But hunger without limits usually is." Emily had ignored the warning because she believed love could soften hard people. She understood now how naive that had been. Nathaniel stared at Emily again, and for one painful second she saw something human beneath all the fear and anger. Regret. Not regret for what he had done to her. Regret that he had finally lost the ability to control the outcome. "Emily," he said quietly, "please." The words sounded foreign coming from him. Vulnerable. She almost remembered the man she married. Almost. Then she remembered the hospital paperwork, the custody filings, the months of manipulation while carrying his child, the loneliness, the humiliation, the endless exhaustion of trying to earn kindness from someone who treated love like leverage. Emily slowly stood again despite the ache running through her back. Rain light shimmered softly across her pale blue dress while the entire room watched her. "Do you know what hurts the most?" she asked quietly. Nathaniel swallowed hard but said nothing. Emily looked directly into his eyes. "I kept thinking if I loved you enough, eventually you would stop treating me like someone temporary." Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. Emily rested one protective hand across her stomach and took a slow breath. "But the truth is," she whispered softly, "you were already planning my replacement before our daughter was even born." Nathaniel lowered his head. And for the first time since entering the room that morning, the billionaire finally looked small. No one in the conference room spoke after Emily's words. The silence carried weight now, heavy enough to crush whatever illusion Nathaniel Brooks had spent years building around himself. Outside the glass walls, thunder rolled somewhere over Manhattan, low and distant, while rain streamed down the skyline in silver waves. Emily remained standing beside the conference table, one hand resting gently against her stomach as her daughter moved again beneath the fabric of her dress. That tiny movement reminded her of something simple and terrifying. Her child would one day learn what love looked like by watching the people closest to her. And Emily suddenly understood she could not allow her daughter to grow up believing this was normal. Nathaniel slowly lowered himself into the chair behind him as if his legs no longer trusted the floor. The room watched him carefully now. Not with admiration. With caution. Predators lose their mystique the moment blood appears in the water. One attorney's phone buzzed softly against the table. Then another. Then another. The old senior partner checked his screen and his face tightened immediately. Nathaniel noticed. "What?" he asked sharply. Nobody answered fast enough. "What happened?" The younger attorney swallowed hard before speaking. "Brooks Global stock just dropped 12%. The air shifted instantly. 12% in under an hour meant panic. Real panic. Somewhere downtown, investors were already whispering into phones. Financial reporters were probably refreshing anonymous tips. Board members were checking legal exposure while pretending not to sweat through their custom suits. Nathaniel grabbed his phone from the table so quickly his hand nearly slipped. Emily watched his eyes scanning the screen. Then came the second notification. Then the third. His expression changed with each one. Evelyn remained calm beside her daughter, adjusting the red folder quietly as though she had already seen this exact moment in her mind long before arriving. "It spreads fast," she said softly. Nathaniel looked up at her. "You leaked this?" "No," Evelyn replied. "Fear leaks itself." Vanessa stood frozen near the doorway, staring at Nathaniel like she no longer recognized the man she once admired. "People are posting about the offshore accounts online," she whispered. "How is that possible?" The senior attorney rubbed both hands over his face. "Because somebody inside the company is talking." Nathaniel slammed his phone onto the table. "Find out who?" But nobody moved. Nobody rushed to obey him anymore. That realization hit harder than any financial loss. Emily saw it happen in real time. The exact second Nathaniel understood authority disappears the moment people stop fearing you. One of the attorneys quietly closed his briefcase. "I think our firm should reconsider representation until the board completes an internal review." Nathaniel stared at him in disbelief. "You are dropping me?" "We are protecting the firm." Nathaniel laughed once. Short. Sharp. Empty. Unbelievable. But the unraveling had already started. Another attorney stood. Then another. The room slowly transformed from a fortress into an evacuation. Vanessa looked around helplessly. "Nathaniel," she whispered carefully, "what do we do?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. And somehow that silence told her everything she needed to know. There was no plan anymore. No secret strategy. No hidden control. Just collapse. Emily felt strangely detached watching it happen. She thought she would feel victorious someday if Nathaniel finally lost. Instead, she only felt tired. Deeply tired. Because revenge fantasies never include the grief of realizing the person you loved never truly existed the way you imagined them. Nathaniel had not suddenly become cruel overnight. The signs were always there. The way he needed admiration like oxygen. The way every disagreement became manipulation. The way apologies always sounded more concerned with preserving his image than understanding her pain. Emily simply kept excusing it because love makes people patient long after they should leave. Nathaniel suddenly stood again and looked directly at her. "Emily," he said quietly, "please do not do this." The room stilled once more. Emily almost laughed at the absurdity of it. After months of humiliation, legal traps, hidden custody filings, financial manipulation, and emotional exhaustion, he still believed she held the power to save him. Like this disaster was somehow her responsibility too. "Do what?" she asked softly. Nathaniel stepped closer. "You know this company matters to thousands of families." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, but she remained silent. Emily understood immediately what he was doing. Reframing himself as the victim. Making her feel guilty for the consequences of his own actions. He had always been skilled at that. But something inside her had changed permanently now. "Do not confuse your empire with your character," Emily said quietly. Nathaniel stopped moving. Emily took one slow breath. "You built a company. That does not erase what you did to people." Along the way, rain hammered violently against the windows behind them, turning the skyline blurry and gray. Nathaniel's shoulders finally sagged beneath the weight of everything collapsing around him. The attorneys were leaving. Vanessa was crying silently near the door. His phone would not stop vibrating across the table. Emily looked at him one last time and suddenly saw the truth clearly enough to stop being afraid. Billionaires only look untouchable from far away. Up close, they are just people who convinced the world their money mattered more than someone else's dignity. Evelyn rose calmly beside her daughter and placed one steady hand against Emily's shoulder. "We are done here," she said softly. Nathaniel looked up quickly. Panic flashed openly across his face for the first time all morning. "Emily," he said again, quieter now, "please do not walk away from me like this." Emily rested both hands gently over her stomach and looked directly into his eyes. "Nathaniel," she whispered softly, "you walked away first. You just expected me to stay standing there forever." The elevator ride down from the 42nd floor felt strangely silent compared to the storm unraveling above them. Emily stood beside her mother inside the mirrored elevator, while soft instrumental music drifted through hidden speakers overhead. Her reflection stared back at her from every angle. Pale blue maternity dress. Exhausted eyes. One hand resting protectively over the curve of her stomach. She barely recognized the woman looking back anymore. Not because she looked weaker. Because for the first time in years, she did not look afraid. Evelyn stood quietly beside her, black gloves folded neatly in one hand while the red folder rested beneath her arm. She had not said much since they left the conference room. She did not need to. Some forms of protection speak loudest through presence alone. The elevator numbers glowed slowly downward. 38. 37. 36. Emily finally exhaled a breath she felt like she had been holding for months. "You knew," she whispered softly. Evelyn glanced toward her reflection. "About what?" "About him." The older woman remained silent for a moment. "I knew he was hungry," she answered carefully. "I just hoped love would teach him limits." Emily lowered her eyes. "I thought if I supported him enough, eventually he would feel safe enough to love me back the same way." Evelyn's expression softened slightly. Kind women often mistake endurance for loyalty. The elevator continued descending through the glowing tower, while rain slid across the glass exterior outside like tears on steel. Emily remembered all the little things she ignored over the years. Nathaniel interrupting her during conversations. Correcting her in front of investors. making decisions without asking her opinion while calling it efficiency. Tiny moments that seemed harmless alone but together slowly erased her confidence piece by piece until she stopped recognizing herself. The elevator doors opened into the private marble lobby. The atmosphere downstairs felt completely different now. Tense. Charged. Receptionists whispered behind glowing computer screens while security guards stood unusually alert near the entrance. Somebody had already leaked information to the press. Emily saw the cameras first through the glass revolving doors outside. Then the crowd. Reporters. Financial bloggers. Photographers standing beneath umbrellas in the pouring Manhattan rain. Flashes of white light exploded against the windows as soon as people inside noticed Evelyn Carter walking beside her pregnant daughter. "That was fast," Emily whispered. Evelyn gave the smallest nod. "Public sympathy moves quicker than stock markets." One of the security guards approached nervously. "Ms. Carter, we can arrange a private exit through the underground garage if you prefer." Emily looked through the glass again. Reporters crowded the sidewalk while thunder rolled across the city skyline overhead. Somewhere far above them, Nathaniel Brooks was probably still sitting in that conference room watching his empire collapse notification by notification. Strangely, Emily did not feel satisfaction thinking about it. Only closure. "No," Evelyn said calmly before Emily could answer. "We leave through the front." The security guard hesitated. "There are at least 40 media personnel outside." Evelyn adjusted her coat collar slightly. "Then perhaps powerful men will finally understand what public humiliation feels like." Emily almost smiled. Not because the moment felt triumphant. Because for the first time all day, she realized she was no longer carrying this alone. The revolving doors slowly turned open. Cold rain-scented air rushed into the lobby instantly along with the sound of camera shutters exploding like fireworks. "Emily. Ms. Carter. Is Brooks Global under federal investigation? Are the offshore accounts real? Did Nathaniel Brooks hide assets during the pregnancy?" Questions crashed toward them from every direction while flashes lit the gray afternoon sky. Emily instinctively froze for half a second. Old fear. Old conditioning. Nathaniel always hated attention he could not control. He trained her for years to avoid scenes. Avoid conflict. Avoid speaking too loudly. But then she felt her daughter move beneath her ribs again. Strong. Alive. Waiting to enter a world where women were expected to shrink themselves for powerful men. Emily slowly lifted her head. The rain touched her face softly as she stepped onto the crowded sidewalk beside her mother. Reporters surged closer immediately. "Emily, do you have a statement?" Cameras flashed across her tired face. Evelyn remained beside her but did not speak. This moment belonged to Emily now. The city noise blurred around her for one strange second. Car horns. Rainfall. Sirens somewhere downtown. All of it faded beneath the simple realization that she did not owe silence to anyone anymore. Emily looked directly toward the cameras. "I spent a long time believing loyalty meant staying quiet," she said softly. The reporters instantly stopped shouting. Even the cameras seemed still somehow. Emily rested both hands gently over her stomach. "But protecting your family sometimes means telling the truth out loud." Thunder rolled again across Manhattan. A reporter near the front lowered his microphone slightly as if realizing this had stopped being a financial scandal and become something far more human. Another flash exploded through the rain. Then another. Emily suddenly noticed movement behind the lobby windows high above them. Nathaniel stood on the 42nd floor behind the glass wall of the conference room, barely visible through rain and distance. Watching. Alone. Emily held his gaze for one final second across 40 stories of steel and storm clouds. Then she turned away first. Evelyn quietly opened a large black umbrella over both of them, while the city lights reflected off the wet pavement below. Mother and daughter stepped forward together into the rain, while behind them cameras continued flashing against the darkening Manhattan sky like the final sparks of a collapsing empire. 3 weeks later, the rain was gone from Manhattan. Spring sunlight spilled across the city in pale gold reflections while traffic moved steadily beneath the towers of glass and steel. News screens inside coffee shops still carried Nathaniel Brooks's face almost daily now. Federal financial inquiries. Emergency board restructuring. Investor lawsuits. Anonymous employees leaking stories about toxic leadership behind closed doors. The empire had not completely fallen yet, but everyone could see the cracks spreading through the foundation. Emily watched one of the reports silently from a television mounted inside her doctor's waiting room before calmly lowering her eyes back toward the tiny pair of white baby socks folded in her lap. The room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh coffee. Peaceful. Ordinary. The kind of quiet she used to think successful people never experienced anymore. Her phone buzzed softly beside her. Another unknown number. Another reporter asking for interviews. Emily declined the call without listening to the voicemail. She had learned something important during the past few weeks. Public attention feels loud at first, but eventually the world moves on to the next scandal. Real healing happens in silence afterward. Emily Carter? The nurse called gently from the hallway. Emily smiled faintly and stood carefully, one hand supporting the curve of her stomach. 8 months had become nearly 9 now. Her daughter would arrive soon. The thought still terrified her sometimes late at night when the apartment felt too quiet, and memories crept in around the edges. But fear no longer controlled every decision she made. That was the difference. After the appointment, Emily stepped outside into warm afternoon sunlight where Evelyn waited beside a black town car parked along the curb. Her mother lowered a newspaper from her lap as Emily approached. The headline stretched boldly across the front page. Brooks Global CEO steps down amid investigation. Evelyn folded the paper neatly without comment. Emily noticed the wedding ring was finally gone from her own hand. She had removed it 2 nights earlier after standing alone in her apartment kitchen staring at it for nearly 20 minutes. Not crying. Not angry. Just ready. How did the appointment go? Evelyn asked softly once Emily settled into the car. Emily smiled for real this time. Strong heartbeat. Healthy weight. Apparently she already likes kicking doctors. Evelyn's quiet laugh filled the car gently. That sounds familiar. They drove downtown through Manhattan traffic while sunlight flashed across skyscraper windows like sheets of gold. For the first time in years, Emily noticed little things again. Street musicians outside subway stations. Couples arguing over maps. A father carrying a sleeping little girl against his shoulder while waiting to cross the street. Ordinary life continued no matter how loudly powerful men collapsed on television. That realization comforted her more than she expected. Her phone buzzed again. This time the screen displayed a familiar name. Nathaniel. Emily stared at it silently while the phone continued vibrating in her hand. Voicemail after voicemail had arrived during the past week. Apologies. Explanations. Promises to fix everything. Promises to change. But some truths arrived too late to save what they destroyed. Evelyn glanced toward the phone but said nothing. Emily finally answered. Silence greeted her at first. Then Nathaniel's voice came softly through the speaker. Tired. Older somehow. Emily. She looked out the car window at sunlight moving across the Hudson River. What do you want, Nathaniel? Another pause. I heard the baby is healthy. Emily rested one hand gently against her stomach. She is. His breathing caught slightly through the phone. I am glad. The silence afterward felt different from the silences inside the conference room weeks earlier. Less dangerous. More human. Nathaniel finally spoke again. I know saying sorry does not fix anything. Emily closed her eyes briefly. No, she answered softly. It does not. Traffic rolled steadily around them while somewhere in the distance church bells rang faintly through the city air. Nathaniel's voice dropped lower. I spent so much time trying to control everything that I forgot people are not investments. Emily said nothing because there was nothing left to explain anymore. Some lessons only arrive after consequences become permanent. I loved you, Nathaniel whispered finally. Emily looked down at the baby's socks folded carefully in her lap. Once upon a time, hearing those words would have shattered her completely. But now they simply felt sad. Maybe you did in the only way you knew how, she said quietly. But love should never make someone feel small. Nathaniel stopped speaking after that. The line remained open for several long seconds before Emily ended the call gently. Not with anger. Not with revenge. Just finality. Evelyn reached across the seat and squeezed her daughter's hand softly. Outside the car windows, Manhattan glittered beneath the afternoon sun while life moved forward block by block around them. Emily rested both hands over her stomach and smiled faintly as her daughter kicked again beneath the fabric of her dress. Strong. Alive. Waiting. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily realized she was not afraid of the future anymore. Because some women do not become powerful when they destroy a man. They become powerful the moment they finally stop begging to be loved correctly.